Bridget Jones, it's time to live.
This Galentine's Day, make a date with Peacock.
I've set you up on Tinder. What? You're welcome.
You can call me Rockstar.
Bridget Jones.
But you can call her mummy.
Experience the final chapter of Bridget's unforgettable journey.
By all that's holy, Bridget Jones.
You are a brilliant woman. Embrace the chaos.
Enjoy your weekend, Mrs. Darcy.
Bridget Jones, Mad About the Boy. Streaming only on Peacock February 13th.
Welcome to Raising Me, a podcast where we dive into the joys and the challenges of parenting, one topic at a time, each and every week. I'm Adrienne Stein, and today we are talking about something that is so key to raising happy and resilient kids. We're talking about play. A big thank you also to our sponsor, Maine Health, as we get started here. So here's the thing. Play is such a fundamental part of childhood, but it isn't just about toys and games. It is how kids learn and process emotions and build social skills. And this is at all ages. It is not just for the little ones. From toddlers to teens, and yes, even us as adults, play is essential for emotional well-being and connection. To help us explore the types of play and why it matters at every age, we are talking with Brooke Hackett, a licensed clinical social worker and a play therapist. She explains how the different kinds of play, from imaginative to rough and tumble play, and even how being bored and having crucial downtime really helps kids to grow and to thrive. Plus, we are talking about ways we as parents can incorporate more play into everyday life, even, of course, when schedules are packed. So, check it out.
Brooke, thank you so much for being here with us. Who doesn't love play? I mean, right? I'm an enthusiast. Thank you for having me. Let's just, play is so much fun, but it's really important. It's an important part of parenting and parenthood and childhood, of course. What is it that got you so interested in play that you were a specialist in play?
Yeah. I think just a part of my personality, I'm drawn towards playful moments, being goofy, being silly. I also I think a part of me inherently has known the power of play in connecting with kids. And I think because of that, I just relate really well with kids, probably better than I do adults at times. But
that's another podcast entirely. You actually have 2 children of your own. What are some of the ways that you play with your own kids?
Ooh. So sometimes it might look a little more like imaginary play, where we sit down with characters or figures and assume different roles. Other times it might look like building or creating with Legos. Other times it might just be playful moments with like playful back and forth banter. So play can look like all kinds of different things.
And of course, based on the age of the child, too. We often think of play when we're thinking of young kids, but play is important at any age.
Yeah. So I'm a play therapist, and in that world, we talk about play as the language of a child. And then the toys are their words. So what I think is really neat is if we're really paying attention to any play that a kiddo does, we get like this little window into their world and how they perceive themselves and others and the world. And so I think that's just why it's really important. Developmentally, kids are not capable of abstract thought or reasoning until about the age of 12. And so neuroscience and all of the recent discoveries in that area as well just really supports using play to really connect with and support kids.
What can the way our kids play teach us about our own kids? And Adam, maybe is that, whether they veer toward Legos versus out riding a bike or, playing cards or board game or whatever it may be. What does a style of play tell us about our kids?
I think really just that every child is different. And so that's where paying attention as a parent is important. And I say that not lightly. I know that parents have so much on their plate, and the idea of like paying attention to every little thing their kiddo does is tricky. But I wouldn't say that there's any necessarily important way to play or different way to play. Just every child, every person has their own unique play preferences and own unique ways to play the important part is that a caregiver or supportive adult kind of attune to that and notice it and kind of take note of it.
So how does play therapy differ from, your traditional talk therapy?
So play therapy can look a handful of different ways, but and it's most simplistic when I'm doing child-centered play therapy, which is kind of like the foundation of play therapy. It's where it all originated from. I am following a child's lead, and I am really following their cues and letting them take charge of what we do and where we go.
Versus in a traditional talk type therapy, you would be asking questions or sort of guiding them. In this aspect, you kind of let them guide you. Is it?
Yes, Dana. So not all talk therapies, I think, are inherently directive, but a kiddo can come to play therapy and not say a word, and I can gain so much insight about this child. So the toys in the playroom are specifically selected, like a kitchen and a dollhouse and different aggressive release.
So what do you notice if they gravitate to one or the other? What are they telling you by gravitating to a certain type of play?
Over time, I can start to assess themes. And so there are different play themes we can look for, like mastery. So when a child is demonstrating mastery in their play, like I can do this, I feel competent in this, we can typically assess that this is a kiddo that feels pretty competent. They feel pretty capable about themselves versus a kiddo who might, in their play, there might be this sense of like, I just can't do it. This like failed mastery. And that suggests that supporting the kiddo and finding avenues to feel more successful is probably just going to be an important part of the treatment. And so that in therapy looks like me really attuning to times when the kiddo is trying really hard and successful and pointing that out, looking for assets and talking about it. And then when I work with parents, kind of communicating to them that at home, maybe there's some more scaffolding that could be done to help the kiddo feel a little more set up to be successful, or just encouraging them to kind of look for those moments of achievement and capable too.
And there are different therapeutic elements of play. Do I understand that correctly?
There is different play themes in some modalities that you can look for. So there's like power and control themes, and that might suggest that it's a kiddo who either has too much power at home or not enough, or is struggling in some way with figuring out where their place is in having power and control in their life.
They either would like more or they have a lot.
Yeah.
And
so that's where parent consultation is really helpful, because I don't really know which one it is until I have some background information about what this child and this family's experience is. It's also sometimes not necessarily related to that, but maybe through that moment, the kiddo is trying out a different role. Maybe their just temperament is such that they do choose to follow, but maybe they're trying out like what it would be like to take charge and be a leader, or different perspective taking. Play has many different therapeutic powers and elements to it, and helping with perspective and gaining perspective is just one of like the 48.
I mean, what are some of the other key ones?
Oh man. So it helps facilitate communication.
Yeah.
So that's again where the kiddo can communicate to me through play.
And their parents too. As parents, if we're watching for that.
Yeah, if we're paying attention. There was a moment where my youngest, and he would have been 2.5 at the time, I can't even remember exactly what he was doing, but we were in kinetic sand, and all of the stuff was getting buried and then thrown out and then buried and then thrown out. And it was just this moment of, I could see him trying to figure out how it worked, and like the frustration tolerance. My youngest is like quick to flip. And so I could totally see him in a safe, in his choice way, just intuitively working on that. Like he was in charge of how much frustration he had in that moment, because he was the one burying them and then tossing them out. But he was getting frustrated, and then he would pause and take a breath and try it again. And so what play also does is it provides distance. Oftentimes through play, kids, sometimes it's absolutely nothing. I like to say that to parents because I don't want people to read in or overanalyze too much of their kiddo's fight.
We can all do that.
Yes. Sometimes it literally is nothing. Or it's something that they maybe saw on a TV show.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to like figure it out a little bit more. But a lot of the time, kids play out what they know or what they need. And so oftentimes kids will create this scene, and given the information I have, or my own kids will do this, I'm like, oh, this happens for them. And we can talk about it through the play, and we can work on like, oh, wow, what do you think this character should do to try check in with that one that they like maybe upset? And we can do that problem solving in a way that feels psychologically safer, because we're not actually talking about like the fight my 8-year-old actually got in at school that day with a kid.
Oh.
We're talking about it through the play. And so what that does is ultimately when we're encouraged to process things that we've done wrong or poor choices that we've made, we get a little like uncomfortable about that. And we start to slip into lower parts of our brain that are capable of problem solving. And so when we eliminate that focus on you, like the spotlight being on you, and just kind of analyze it through the play, we're able to access our whole brain and think about those things. And it wires the same neural pathway in our brain as it would if we were to actually be talking about it like it was us in the moment.
So a couple of things come to mind. What are the ages that is most beneficial for? You said, there's a developmental shift around 12. Is it sort of up to the age of 12 that this could be beneficial? And then 2, I'm thinking of this scenario with you and your child. You're coming at it with these questions and be prepared as a play therapist. How do we as parents who are just regular Joe Schmoes, all without the therapy training, what kinds of questions should we or could we be asking to help get our child to open up?
So, great question. I'm actually trained in something called FECT, which is Familial Encouraging Connection Therapy, where I kind of train parents to be like a little mini play therapist. And also, that isn't inherently necessary to be able to do that. I would say that actually the biggest thing I would say to parents is to ask less questions.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And to just notice, just to notice what's happening. Like, wow, like that is doing that and that is doing that. Which is,
so just more observing,
yeah,
sitting with your child in whatever way they are playing, but observing and stating fact versus, well, tell me more about what this person is doing or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And if there's something that feels important, we can definitely be like, oh, I'm curious about that one.
Wow.
And if kiddos are in the heat of like an important play moment, they might not acknowledge your question. And so like, if I were to tell anything to parents, like, that's okay. Like, let them keep going. They think as parents, and I do this all the time, even though I'm a play therapist, it's a lot easier to do with clients.
Yeah.
Than very, of course, that's okay. Like, just to roll with it.
Then, about the age, though, like, is this really primarily more, because I'm thinking of my 6-year-old who does play, with his Legos or, whatever it might be. Whereas I also have a 12-year-old who is not necessarily playing with toys, So how would we apply this to older kids?
Yeah. Older kids,
maybe does play just look different?
Play looks different. Yeah. For some.
Yeah.
And I have some 12-year-olds who come and still really love to get into a dollhouse.
Well, it's like, but it depends on the mood, right?
100%.
Because it's either like, oh yeah, cool, like kind of maybe flashback to their childhood, or it's like super lame, cringe, whatever. So it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And so
nothing feels better than feeling your best, which is why Maine Health continues to provide Northern New England with the best network of people, programs, and resources working to help you be your healthiest self. And by doing so, we're creating different paths and giving you options in personal wellness. That's health and care in harmony. That's Maine Health. To learn more, go to mainehealth.org/harmony.
a really important part of play that I don't think I've specifically said or spoke to yet is there's definitely the gaining insight into our child's world that I think if we pay attention enough, we can get gleans into. But for parents, I think the most important thing about play is that it just creates a moment to connect with your kiddo. And it creates this opportunity to just delight in them. for no other reason than just enjoying to be with them. And I think we can do that with kids of all age. And 12-year-olds, it might look like sitting with them while they're playing video games and so on and so forth. One of my play therapy mentors, Dr. Terry Kottman, tells this story. She has a 30-something-year-old child, and she still will go over to his house and sit with him while he's playing a video game that she doesn't really care a lot about.
Yeah.
But she'll use some of these play therapy skills like tracking, and that's just the noticing, and like talk about it through the video game. Like, you're doing that, you're doing that. And just what that does is it shows like I'm present with you. Like I'm not zoning out, I'm not making my grocery list. Like, I am here with you in it. And his video game buddies from, I think, like, I don't know, different screen, will be like, is that your mom doing that? And he's like, yeah, it's just this thing my mom does to spend time with me. And so on the surface, it's that. But underneath it, the goal is that, like, I value you enough to come here and be with you and like really pay attention. And I think as parents, if we can all try to be mindful of doing more of that, our kids are just gonna, it always has a positive impact.
Just meeting them where they are. So like I'm going through my mind of, okay, then my 16-year-old, maybe are we going to wander the mall together? Or, you know, she loves baking. So like baking something together, like meeting them where they are doesn't necessarily look like the play of a 6-year-old or 5-year-old or a 4-year-old, but it's their time of enjoyment, whatever that looks like.
Yes, you nailed it. So I think the really important thing to remember is every kiddo is different. And the power of play for kids is that it brings this moment of meeting them exactly where they are. So often kids of all ages and people just generally are asked to like abandon themselves for different reasons. And sometimes we have to assume different roles for life and so on and so forth. But for kids, they're often asked to like developmentally level up. And so when we come down to their level and meet them where they're at with their interests and say, you are so important to me that I am willing to like prioritize doing this with you, it just helps kids really feel seen and known for who they are, which in return helps them feel valued and worthy, which a lot of kids and a lot of people, not just kids, don't struggle with.
Yeah. You know, even beyond therapy, just thinking about play in general, it's very important for like social skills, cognitive skills, emotional skills. Yes. Can you talk to that a little bit?
So I think it can all, like if we take an attachment lens, I can go deep into the weeds, so I'm going to try not to. But attachment really is our ability to connect with people and to connect to ourselves. And so when attachment starts out as itty bitty babies, the research shows that individuals, babies, can't establish a sense of self without first co-creating a we. So we learn about who we are through relationships. We figure out how to trust ourselves by first learning how to trust someone else. And so that looks like peekaboo, like a game. We play with babies, and it looks like when they make this certain noise or face, we do this back, and it's that serve and return, which is social skills. And as kids grow, that does start to look different, but it still has equal importance.
When it comes to play, this can be an important part for, you know, kids who have experienced trauma too. So how, for children who have experienced trauma, whatever that might look like, how do you use play in therapy to help?
I think there's a lot of times the following their lead, the creating the distance. Trauma lives in the right side of our brain, which is not the language part of our brain. And so even adults, I really feel like a nonverbal way of working through trauma is really important.
So what does it mean that trauma lives in the right side of your brain, not the language side?
Yeah.
Like, does that make it difficult just in general for people to process trauma? And obviously we have many of us, everybody does have some sort of trauma, but it lives, why should we care that it's in the right side of our brain?
So the right side of our brain is our more creative side of our brain. It is where we are creating, playing, expressing. And the left side of our brain is where more of our cognitive parts live, our language lives. And so sometimes if trauma happens old enough and maybe we're able to be distant from it enough, we can cognitively talk about it, but the processing of it is still tricky. And for a lot of kids, a lot of trauma happens before they have any cognitive function. And so the trauma happened, but they don't have a cognitive memory of it or a story to tell about it. But it still lives in the body. It lives in the right side of the brain. And that comes out in play for kids and adults. One of my favorite modalities to use with adults and teens is sand tray. And so it's a play-based modality. What people do is they pick different miniatures that get to represent whatever they want them to, which is a very basic play therapy. It gets to be whatever you want it to be. And they place them in the sand however they want to. And then we just kind of like notice the different placement, the different figures. We get curious about it. And it's not uncommon for people to kind of end up a little bit of a wet, soggy mess, like in tears. And they're like, I didn't mean to put any of this in here, but it just kind of shows up. And that's just kind of speaking to the magic of like, first we need to kind of put a picture out there and then we can find words for it. But finding words first can be really tricky when it's something like a traumatic experience.
Wow, wow. That really, I bet that is fascinating. I think too, like play, so often we are in a very structured environment. Here's the game. This is how you play it. This is what you're supposed to do. This is how you win by doing these steps. The idea of unstructured play is incredibly important. Sometimes it feels like our kids don't have quite as much just unstructured. There's always an activity. There's always a sport. There's always something. But having that unstructured type play is really important. Why?
Going back to attachment, a lot of people think about attachment as a relationship to someone else, like this connectedness they feel to someone else, but that's only half of attachment. Attachment is equal parts. I feel safe and secure in this relationship. And also I feel safe and secure in exploring my autonomy and my individuality. And part of that comes with doing our own thing. It comes with going out and having to figure things out for ourselves, being bored. I talk to this all the time to my kids anyway. I'm like, we're just practicing being bored. Like we're just like,
and how exciting for you.
At first I get some huffing and puffing.
Yeah.
Into like in the beginning, like meltdowns and tantrums. Like, but now it's just like an eye roll and like, my mom really thinks it's important to be bored. We were driving. My family lives up north, about 3 hours away. And I was like, we're not having screens on this ride, which was like really a weird choice because that was more torture for me than probably anyone else.
100%. Yeah. And I appreciate that for sure.
And my partner was driving and we had made it quite a long time before getting bored. And then we had just gotten some like food and we had straws and I don't know how it came up, but we just started making spitballs and like spitting them back and forth. And my oldest was like, how did you ever think of doing this? And I'm like, well, back in the day, we were Dora
entertain yourself.
So we found out and I was like, wow, I'm going to go to school and teach all my friends. I'm like, maybe not at school.
Yeah, right. Got in lots of trouble.
Right? Like this isn't a school activity. This is like
but that goes back to, related here is that there is just very little downtime for kids in general because the downtime is often filled with a screen. I think of my teenager who the other day I was thinking like, I don't think she allows enough time. This is for any teenager probably really, but I was thinking of my daughter in particular, like just allowing that quiet in your brain. There's school, there's sports, there's hanging with friends, and then there's being on the phone and talking to your friends, or you're Snapchatting, or you're FaceTiming, or you're doing whatever.
Something.
Like, where is that I'm doing nothing time? Where is it?
Most kids tell me that's when they're scrolling TikTok. And I was like, that's not
and your brain is still activated by that, right? And then then we can go down into the algorithm where it's feeding you things that you're like interested in. So your brain's like thinking about it. You're like, just and more.
Quick.
It's the dopamine.
Yeah. It's that constant dopamine feed.
Yeah. So it feels like there's just not that, to your point, just the boredom, allowing kids to be bored because it's a very quick fix to just grab a phone, grab a tablet, grab a whatever without being in that uncomfortableness of being bored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, we're going to want something for a dopamine.
Distraction.
Yeah. It feels better than just sitting there and doing nothing. Yeah. But that's when So the other side of like that autonomy and like why it's really important is like, it's really important for kids to figure out that they can feel bored and they can be okay.
That's the key.
Yeah. Like I can not really know what to do. And I trust that eventually I'll find something.
Yeah.
Maybe even I feel really mad at my parent right now because they won't let me have this thing I want. And like, I can feel that really mad and still not get what I want. And we can all end up okay. It's that like sitting in the stink, like sitting in the stink. I usually say it a different way, but I adjust it.
Yeah.
Oh,
I got you. How, you know, when it comes to play though, and we've talked about all and why it's so important for kids, it's important for adults too. And when it comes to modeling, we should be modeling how to, that's so much easier said than done. You know, speaking from experience, working, juggling 3 kids, you know, all the things.
Where's the time?
Where is that time? But to model it, why is that so important for our kids? Whether it's going to play, you know, I play pickleball every once in a while when I can, or going to the beach with a friend or whatever it is, that modeling piece.
Kids learn better by seeing than by someone just saying. To do it, to live your message just is more authentic. It's like, yeah, I'm doing this. And they see that should be prioritized. And my hope would be like, play is so therapeutic. One of the powers is catharsis and just feeling good while you're doing it. It's like I see my mom play pickleball, and when she comes home, I can tell she's feeling really, really good about herself. And being able to kind of notice that connection. Also, if we encourage play for kids and don't ever do it ourselves, kids are like the first person to call you out that you're a little bit of a hypocrite.
Yeah, so true. So if there was one takeaway for us as parents, whether it's incorporating it into our lives or just what we should be mindful of when it comes to our kids, what would that be?
To maybe just create more time for that unstructured time. Kids are really busy. There's a lot of stuff that they can be doing. I was just talking earlier about the pressure parents are under to always have their kids in an activity, but doing all the things. It's a lot. So just the value in it, I think. And then also that it's okay just to be with your kiddo. I think a lot of times when parents are with their kids, like I see this all the time when I do parent-child, like filial, like family work. They'll be reading a story. And it's almost like as adults, because we're oftentimes so far disconnected from just the being with and playing, that we feel like we always need to be doing something. And we kind of unintentionally impose that on our kids through even just as like, I do this too, but when I catch myself, I try not to. Reading a book and being like, what color is that? We turn play oftentimes as parents into teaching. And that
adds to the stress of parenting too. Yeah. That you always have to be on.
Yeah.
So just the simplicity of just being.
Yeah, just be with your kids. And no one has to perform. As a parent, you don't have to perform. You just get to be you. Mm-hmm. Your kiddo doesn't have to perform for you or know what color that is or whatever. That you guys are just together, delighting in each other. Like one takeaway is just delight more in your kids. And I know that sometimes can feel really hard. And we have to really be intentional about finding it.
Brooke, thank you so much. So insightful. And of course, I want to make sure that our viewers or listeners know that we have more resources on WGME.com/RacingMe. Brooke, so much good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So that was a big one for me in this, just getting back to being with our kids rather than always feeling like that need to make sure there's a lesson happening or teaching happening. I realize that subconsciously I do that a lot. So just being with and delighting in our kids. There was this like little mini pressure release with that simple reminder from Brooke. Ultimately, it's just that play is such a great connector between us and our kids, regardless of age, and just meeting our kids where they are, whether it's dress up and blocks and Legos or baking and board games and trips to wander the mall. Thank you so much for listening to Raising Me. I'm Adrienne Stein. This episode is edited by Megan Littlefield and produced with Nate Eldridge. A big thank you also to our sponsor, Maine Health. Please follow Raising Me wherever you get your podcasts and consider a positive rating and review so others can find this message as well. Wherever you are, I hope you learn something new and get to take a little time for you.